Have you ever gotten that feeling that the world is being, well, quietly rewritten? Like there's some invisible force out there changing the phone in your pocket, the websites you visit, all without anyone really noticing. Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on what might just be the world's most powerful and most invisible superpower. All right, let's just jump right in with something that probably affected you personally. For years, Apple was all about their Lightning connector, right? And then boom, the iPhone 15 comes out and suddenly it's USB-C. Not just for one country, but for the entire planet. But here's the crazy part. That decision, it wasn't made in Cupertino. Or what about this? You know how every single website you go to now, no matter if it's based in New York or Tokyo, hits you with that pop-up about cookies and data privacy? It's a universal annoyance. You have to ask, who on earth made that a global rule? Now for a real heavyweight example. Way back in 2001, two massive American companies, General Electric and Honeywell, were about to merge in a $42 billion deal. The US government gave it the green light. But then, the whole thing just collapsed. It wasn't an American regulator that killed it. So who had that kind of muscle? The iPhone charger, the cookie pop-ups, and that monster merger getting blocked? The answer to all of it is exactly the same. It's this quiet but incredibly powerful regulatory force that operates out of Brussels, the heart of the European Union. So yeah, this whole phenomenon actually has a name, and it's the key to understanding this entire unseen power dynamic. We're about to unpack what's called the Brussels effect, or put simply, how Europe is quietly writing the rulebook for the rest of the world. So what is this thing really? Well, the Brussels effect is the EU's superpower of making its laws go global. Here's how it works. The EU is a massive, wealthy market, and its rules on everything from privacy to pollution are often the strictest on Earth. So if you're a global company, say like Apple, it's just way cheaper and easier to make one product that meets that super high EU standard and sell it everywhere, instead of making 10 different versions for 10 different markets. You know, this completely flips the usual way we think about regulation. We always hear about this race to the bottom, right? Like the Delaware effect, where places lower their standards to try and attract businesses. The Brussels effect is the total opposite. It creates a race to the top, where the EU's tough standards accidentally become the default for literally everyone. And believe me, this isn't just some academic theory. The EU has a whole arsenal of these regulatory weapons. Let's take a look at how they actually work in the real world. First up, the digital world. The reason you're always clicking accept all cookies? That's GDPR, the EU's huge data privacy law. It was so intense that giants like Facebook and Microsoft just decided it was easier to apply its rules to all their customers worldwide. And now, history's repeating itself with AI. The EU's new AI Act is the first of its kind, and it's already setting the global standard that every US tech company is scrambling to meet. It also shapes the actual physical stuff in your life. That USB-C port on the new iPhone? Yep, a direct result of an EU mandate. Apple just couldn't afford to ignore the European market, so the whole world got a new charger. And it happened with airplanes, too. Back in 2012, the EU said any airline flying in its airspace had to pay for its carbon emissions. That forced manufacturers like Boeing to build more efficient planes for their entire global fleet. And the EU's power even extends to being a global business cop. Remember that GE-Honeywell merger? It was Brussels that shut it down. Since the merged company couldn't operate in Europe, the deal was basically dead everywhere. We saw the same thing with chemical safety. When the EU passed its super strict REACH regulations, the American giant Dow Chemical just went ahead and adopted those high standards for its entire global operation. It's just more efficient that way. Okay, so here's the really crucial part. This isn't just about making better, safer products. The Brussels effect is a key tool for a much bigger, much more political goal. The EU is consciously turning its market power into raw political power to achieve something it calls strategic autonomy. So what is strategic autonomy? You know, at its heart, it's Europe's grand plan to stand on its own 2 feet. It's about being able to act in its own interest without being too dependent on anyone else, especially the United States for military security or China for all its supply chains. It's about becoming its own boss. And they're building this strategy on 3 main fronts. In defense, it's about bulking up their own military capabilities. Economically, it's all about this idea of de-risking. And in the tech world, it's about achieving what they call digital sovereignty. A great example is this project called Gaia-X, which is basically an attempt to build a European cloud and data system so they're not so reliant on Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And this isn't just talk, they're making it official. In June 2023, the EU rolled out its European Economic Security Strategy. Now, there's a lot of jargon here, but it all comes down to three things: promote, protect, and partner. Promote is about their own economy. Partner is about working with friends. But the real action, the real teeth of this whole thing, is that pillar in the middle, protect. That's all about defending Europe from economic threats. Now, a huge tool in that protect playbook is screening foreign investments. And when you think about who the EU is trying to protect itself from, you probably have one country in mind. But the data tells a very different story. Just look at this number for a second: 32%. And that's where this gets really interesting. That 32%, that's the share of investments the EU screened that came from the United States. The number one target of Europe's new defensive economic tools isn't China, it's America. This shows you that strategic autonomy isn't just about rivals. It's about reducing dependence on everybody, even your closest friends. So what this all sets up is a huge global question, because this quiet fight over regulations is actually a much bigger competition over who gets to write the operating system for the 21st century. And what we're seeing is a clash between two totally different models. On one side, you have the EU with its broad, rule-based, de-risking approach. On the other side, you've got the US, which is way more offensive, using targeted tools like the Inflation Reduction Act or its powerful investment screening committee to hit very specific security goals. They're allies, but they have two very different playbooks for the future. And don't think for a second that this isn't intentional. The political will here is absolutely real. After a trip to China, French President Emmanuel Macron said it out loud: Europe must resist pressure to become America's followers. He made it clear they don't want to get dragged into conflicts that aren't their own. So it really all boils down to this. The United States has its incredible military. China has its unbelievable industrial might. In this new world of giants, can the European Union, a regulatory empire built not on armies but on rulebooks, actually win? The answer to that is going to define the century we all live in.